Her hands trembled as she clamped them over Madame Bridget's mouth. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, her chest rising and falling in panic. From the other side of the door, Paul's voice slithered through the silence. "She will soon be dead. I will make it look like an accident. That foolish woman doesn't know tonight will be her last night on earth. Her wealth, her house, and her legacy will all belong to me, and no one will ever suspect a thing." The words cut like fire. Madame Bridget held Esther's hands tightly. She could not believe the words. Her own nephew was plotting her death, ready to steal everything she had built. Before we dive in, I know many of you are watching from every corner of the world, bound together by the love of powerful African stories. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'll be there with you. And if this kind of storytelling moves you, don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world and helps us keep these stories alive. This is the story of Madame Bridget, the wealthiest woman in the city of Lagos, and how her kind maid Esther saved her from her wicked nephew. Esther had been working in Madame Bridget's house for only 8 months. She was 24 and came from a small village near Lagos State. Her parents had died when she was 18, leaving her with nothing but a piece of land. After struggling for years in the village, watching her friends marry or move away, she finally decided to try her luck in the big city. When she first arrived in Lagos, the noise and chaos overwhelmed her. Cars honked constantly, people rushed past her without looking, and the buildings seemed to touch the sky. She had never seen so many people in one place. For 3 weeks, she slept on her aunt's small couch in a cramped apartment, sharing the space with her aunt's 4 children. Every day she walked the streets looking for work, but no one wanted to hire a village girl with no experience. Her aunt had finally gotten her the job at Madame Bridget's mansion through a friend who knew someone who worked there. When Esther first saw the mansion, she couldn't believe it was real. The gates were made of gold-painted iron, and the driveway curved through gardens filled with flowers she had never seen before. The house itself was 3 stories tall, with white walls and large windows that sparkled in the sunlight. Every morning, Esther woke at 5 o'clock. She swept the floors of the massive living room, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The living room alone was bigger than her aunt's entire apartment. She scrubbed the kitchen counters, she polished the wooden furniture, and arranged fresh flowers in crystal vases that probably cost more than she had ever owned. Everything in the house spoke of wealth and success. But despite all this luxury, Esther always felt comfortable there. Her employer, Madame Bridget, was a powerful woman. At 50, she was one of the wealthiest women in Lagos, owner of a large fabrics company that clothed half the city. She had built the company from nothing, starting with a small shop in the market when she was just 25. Now, 30 years later, her company supplied materials to markets across West Africa. She was strong, elegant, and carried her years with pride. Her staff respected her because she was fair and paid them well. Her clients admired her because she delivered quality products on time and never broke her promises. After her husband's death, she threw herself into her work, growing the company even larger. But inside her home, there was one slimy shadow that refused to go away: her nephew, Paul. Paul was 25 years old. He was handsome, with light skin and a charming smile that made people like him immediately. He dressed well, spoke well, and knew how to make conversation with anyone. To the world, he was the perfect nephew. He attended charity events with Madame Bridget, smiled for photographs at business functions, and spoke sweetly about his auntie in interviews. But when the world wasn't looking, Paul was completely different. He was mean and demanding. He shouted at the house staff over small things like his coffee being too hot or his clothes not being pressed perfectly. He spent his days at expensive restaurants with friends, drove around in Madame Bridget's luxury cars, and bought designer clothes with money from her accounts. The first day Esther met him,
She knew she didn't like him, and he didn't like her either. He never said please or thank you when asking her to do something. He treated her like she was invisible, talking about her in front of her as if she couldn't hear. She could never understand why Madame Bridget put up with his behavior, but she never interfered. She knew her place and respected her employer. One humid Thursday night, as Esther was carrying fresh towels from the laundry room to the upstairs bathrooms, everything changed. It was almost 9 o'clock, and she was finishing her evening tasks. The house was quieter than usual. Madame Bridget had come home late from a business meeting and had gone straight to her study to read through contracts. As Esther walked down the long hallway toward the master bedroom, she heard something that froze her steps. Paul's voice was coming from his room, but it sounded different. It was low, cold, almost whispering. She had never heard him speak in that tone before. Usually, he was either shouting angrily or speaking in his fake, charming voice. This was something else entirely. She stopped walking and leaned closer to the half-open door. Her heart began to beat faster. Something told her she should keep walking, mind her own business, but something else made her stay and listen. She's 50, no children, her husband is gone. Everything, including the estate, falls to me when she's out of the way. Tonight, quietly, I don't want any noise. Esther's hands began to shake. The towels felt heavy in her arms. She pressed herself against the wall, forcing herself to breathe silently. She wanted to run, but her legs felt weak. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. Paul continued talking to someone on the phone. The voice on the other end said something Esther couldn't hear clearly, but she could tell it was a man's voice. The will is already written. As her nephew and only family, everything comes to me. The house, the company, the bank accounts, everything. We'll be rich beyond our dreams. Esther felt sick to her stomach. Paul was planning to kill Madame Bridget. The woman who had been kind to her, who had given her a job when she had nothing, who paid her fairly and treated her with dignity, was going to be murdered by her own nephew. She heard footsteps coming from the direction of the study. Madame Bridget was walking down the hallway, probably going to the bedroom to sleep. Her reading glasses were dangling from her hand, and her gown brushed softly against the floor. She looked tired but peaceful, unaware that she was walking straight toward danger. Esther moved fast. Without thinking about the consequences, without worrying about losing her job or being accused of disrespecting her employer, she dropped the towels on the floor and rushed toward Madame Bridget. She pressed her hand over her employer's mouth and pulled her into a small alcove near the bathroom. "Don't talk," she whispered urgently. "Please, Ma, trust me." Shock filled Madame Bridget's eyes. Her maid had never touched her before, let alone covered her mouth and dragged her into a corner. But something in Esther's expression, the fear, the urgency, the desperation, made her stop struggling and listen. They both stood still in the shadows, listening to Paul's voice carry down the hallway. "Don't worry about the method. I'll make it look like an accident." She's stressed, always working. Blood pressure problems run in the family. No one will ask questions when a 50-year-old woman dies of a heart attack. The substance you gave me works perfectly. Tasteless, odorless, and it mimics the symptoms exactly. Madame Bridget's body went rigid. Her eyes widened as the truth struck her like lightning. Her own nephew, the man she treated like a son, the man she gave everything he ever wanted, was planning to murder her. Tears started forming in her eyes, and her knees felt weak.
Esther quickly led Madame Bridget away from the bedroom area, down the hallway, and back into the small study where she had been reading earlier. She closed the door softly and turned the lock. The room was dark except for the small reading lamp on the desk, which cast long shadows on the walls. Madame Bridget collapsed into her leather chair, her hands shaking violently. She couldn't speak. The shock was too great. Everything she thought she knew about her life,
her family, and her future had just been destroyed in a few overheard sentences. "Ma," Esther whispered, kneeling beside the chair. "We need to call the police. Right now." Madame Bridget nodded, but her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't dial the numbers on her phone. The simple task of pressing buttons seemed impossible when her whole world had just collapsed. Esther took the phone gently from her hand and dialed the emergency number. "Hello? Police?" she said as quietly as possible. "We need help. Someone is planning to commit murder." The operator asked for details, and Esther quickly explained the situation as clearly as she could. She gave the address and said it was urgent, a matter of life and death. "Ma," Esther said to Madame Bridget, "you need to call your lawyer too, and maybe your business partner, people who can witness what's happening and protect you." Madame Bridget managed to dial her lawyer's number with trembling fingers. Johnson had been her lawyer for 15 years and handled all her business and personal legal matters. "Johnson," she whispered when he answered, her voice barely audible. "I need you to come to my house immediately. And call the police yourself. Tell them Bridget Benson needs protection from her nephew." Johnson could hear the fear in her voice and didn't ask questions. Outside, the storm that had been building all day was getting worse. Lightning flashed against the tall windows, lighting up the room for brief moments before plunging it back into shadows. Thunder crashed so loudly that the house seemed to shake, and rain pelted against the glass. They could hear footsteps in the hallway. Paul was moving around the house, probably looking for Madame Bridget. His voice called out, trying to sound casual and caring. "Auntie Bridget, where are you? I thought I heard voices. Is everything all right?" Esther stood in front of Madame Bridget, her body small but determined. She was afraid. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst, but she was not going to let anything happen to the woman who had been kind to her when no one else would. "Stay behind me, Ma," she whispered, "no matter what happens." The footsteps got closer. Paul knocked on the study door, gently at first. "Auntie Bridget? Are you in there? Why is the door locked? Did something happen?" Madame Bridget looked at Esther with terror in her eyes. Esther put her finger to her lips, signaling for complete silence. "I know you're in there," Paul said, his voice getting harder and more impatient. "Open this door right now. We need to talk." In the distance, they could hear sirens cutting through the sound of the storm. The police were coming, but they seemed far away. Paul heard them too. "What's that noise?" His voice changed completely. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by something suspicious and dangerous. "Auntie Bridget, what have you done?" The study door handle turned violently, but the lock held. Paul pushed harder and began pounding on the door. "Auntie Bridget, open this door right now. What did you tell them?" The front door of the mansion burst open with a crash. Armed police officers stormed into the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their voices shouting commands. The sound of their boots echoed through the marble hallways as they spread out to secure the building. Esther unlocked the study door carefully and opened it just wide enough to see out. She saw Paul standing in the hallway, his face pale and confused. He was still holding his phone in one hand and looked like he had been caught completely off guard. "Officers, we're in here," Esther called out, her voice steady despite her fear. Several policemen rushed toward them. "What is the meaning of this?" Paul demanded, trying to sound authoritative and innocent. "This is my house. You have no right to be here. I'm calling my lawyer." Madame Bridget emerged from the study, supported by Esther's steady arm. Her face was pale, but her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. "Officer, I am Bridget Benson, the owner of this house. My nephew was planning to kill me tonight. This young woman saved my life." Paul's expression changed completely. The charming smile that had fooled so many people disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. But he was too smart to give up easily. "Auntie Bridget, what are you talking about? You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you're having some kind of breakdown. You need rest, not police." "I heard everything, Paul," Madame Bridget said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Every word, about making it look like a heart attack, about taking over my company, about the substance that would kill me." Paul laughed, but it sounded hollow and forced. "This is ridiculous. Auntie, these people are filling your head with nonsense. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them you trust me." More people arrived at the house. The house became busy with people asking questions, taking notes, and searching for evidence. The police interviewed Esther first, asking her to repeat exactly what she had heard and when. She spoke clearly and calmly, describing Paul's exact words and the tone of his voice. She told them about the phone call, about the unknown man he was talking to, and about the substance he had mentioned. Paul continued to deny everything, but the police were thorough. They searched Paul's phone and found the recent call to a number registered to a man with a big criminal record. They contacted the phone company to get detailed records of his conversations over the past month. They searched his computer and found disturbing internet searches about poisons, heart attacks, and inheritance laws. Most importantly, they found a small glass bottle containing a strange clear liquid hidden in Paul's dresser drawer, behind his expensive watches. The pressure was already too much for Paul. Just as the police were about to formally arrest him, he made his move. He suddenly pushed past two officers and ran toward the back door, probably hoping to escape through the gardens. But it was no use. Officers were already positioned around the house, and within minutes they had him surrounded at the garden. Paul was arrested and held in custody while the police gathered more evidence. News of the arrest spread quickly through Lagos. Headlines in newspapers read, "Billionaire CEO's nephew arrested in murder plot," and "Young Maid saves employer's life." During the trial that followed, Esther was the key witness. She testified clearly and calmly about what she had heard that night. She described Paul's exact words, the tone of his voice, and the fear she had felt for her employer's safety. The prosecution presented phone records, search histories, and, most damning of all, the laboratory report on the substance found in Paul's room. The liquid was identified as a powerful poison that could cause symptoms identical to a heart attack. It was tasteless, odorless, and would have killed Madame Bridget within hours while making her death appear completely natural. The evidence was overwhelming, and Paul was sentenced to 50 years in prison. It was the end of Paul's life as he knew it. But for Esther, life was about to change completely. Madame Bridget made sure of it. She adopted Esther as her own daughter, legally and emotionally. She enrolled her in university and treated her like the daughter she never had. Years later, when Esther was 30, she was made the general manager of Bridget Textiles, earning a salary that allowed her to support herself comfortably and even help other young women from poor families find jobs and education. She had her own office in the company headquarters, with her name on the door and her university. One morning, as Esther stood on the balcony of the mansion, watching the city wake up under a soft sunrise, she reflected on how much her life had changed. The scared young woman who had once cleaned this house was gone, replaced by a confident businesswoman who was respected throughout the city. To everyone who hears this story, remember that courage may not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is a whisper, a step forward when fear says to step back, a decision to act when others would look away. If this story has touched you, carry its message with you and remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to stand up for what is right.